As the campaigns kick off, data-driven conversation is going to be the hallmark of what we will be doing to challenge the government on what they've been doing with the stewardship handed down to them about 4 years or 3 years ago. And then the opposition, what are the alternatives? Well, yesterday we got some insight into the numbers, and those numbers will be scrutinized today on the program. Welcome, I'm Jeffrey Ozana. This is Lunchtime Politics. Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Taiwo Oyedele, provides insight into subsidy savings and spendings. We examine that scorecard today. Retired military officers protest at Defense HQ amidst tight security over non-implementation of a consequential adjustment to their pensions following recent salary increase for serving officers. Thanks again for coming on the program. I'm Jeffrey Ozonga. Before we delve into political economy, let's talk about our personnel, the men who served our country, drawn from the armed forces, the Nigerian police, the Nigerian immigration and vehicle inspection officers, among others, took over the headquarters of the Ministry of Defense, Abuja, yesterday in order to prevent a breakdown of law and order due to a protest by retired military personnel under the umbrella of the Military Veterans Association of Nigeria, led by retired Colonel Azubike Nas. The retired military officers were protesting the non-implementation of consequential adjustment to their pensions following the recent increase of salaries of military officers personnel by the President Bola Tinubu.
Since last year, November last year, Mr. President approved the new salary increase for the military and other paramilitary. It's been in the news all over. The military high command at every given occasion keeps thanking the president for the salary increase. November last year, this is August this year, they have not implemented it. As if it's a scam. And then a new pronouncement comes up again. The new pronouncements put the minimum wage of the serving personnel at 180,000. It took pressure for them to do that. Yeah. If they have discarded the one of last year as if it never existed, and they want to implement this new one that places the minimum wage at about 180,000, if they want to implement it by law, Constitution, and the Armed Forces Act, there should be consequential adjustment, that is increase in the pay of pensioners, to meet up at par. But they computed the fund requirement. They computed the fund requirement to implement the recently announced one, and they excluded pensioners. It's for that parity that the Constitution provides that whenever there is increase in salary, it carries consequential adjustment for the retirees.
Well, our program today, we're going to be talking about reforms, the savings and the spending as presented by the Honorable Minister for Finance. But before that, let's tell you on our DSTV platform, we'll be crossing over to River State for a live coverage of the commissioning of Elele Egbeda Omoko Dual Carriageway, which traverses Ikwere Emoha, Ogba Egbe Mandoni local government area. And the Vice President is expected to be inaugurating that particular project and is in Port Harcourt, River State as we speak. So that's going to be on our DSTV platform. But all of that our program continues on all of that platforms right here. Let's talk about the Osun State governor. He has now appealed to his political opponents to collaborate with him towards ensuring progress and development of the state in all areas. The governor made this call while delivering his address in Oshogbo at the occasion of the presentation of certificate of return to him and his running mate after being declared winner of August the 15th governorship election.
Osun State has overcome. Yes. I brought the light to Osun State. And I drove darkness out of Osun State. Osun State will never see darkness again. We will keep moving forward. Nobody will turn us around again. I'm seeing the opportunity that all my other contestants, they should please come over. Let's join hands together and let's move Osun State forward. Why I'm saying that Osun State is bigger than anybody. And I'd like to see this opportunity for those who lost their life during the election, may their soul rest in peace. Amen. And I'm telling, and of course, I'm telling you that all those who have lost their life, I'm promising, the American family is promising to take their, not government money now. God has blessed us. I'm going to bless all the people that lost their life, their children. We be giving scholarship to Adeleke High School and Adeleke University. Just to compensate them. And finally, Mr. President, Jagaban. I really appreciate you, Mr. President, for making democracy to stay in Nigeria. That's all what we want. And I wish you all the best in that 2027 election.
Well, that's Governor Ademola Adeleke of the Accord Party in Osun State, speaking about the outcome of the election. But let's talk about what played out yesterday. The Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, made a presentation in company of his colleagues, the Minister of Budget and Planning, Minister of State for Budget and Planning, as well as the NRS boss, that's Zach Adedeji, and several other persons who, DG Budget Office, where he reeled out what the subsidy savings are, as well as how they were spent. Let's take a listen to him.
Of a fuel subsidy that was quietly bankrupting the country, and the unification of an exchange rate system that had become a source of arbitrage, distortion, and corruption rather than stability. Those decisions came at a real cost, and we're not here to pretend otherwise.
He highlights the benefits of the reforms to Nigerians, describing the criticisms as unfair.
Between June 2023 and December 2025, subsidy savings mobilized the sum of 15.8 trillion naira in resources for the Federation. Many people will say, where is the subsidy saving? As a matter of fact, there wasn't any alert to the Federation account with the description subsidy savings. So the subsidy savings showed up in form of higher collection by customs, because for every 1 naira or $1 of import duty before, at 460 naira, it became $1 at 1,004, 1,003, 1,005.
He also highlights the harms prevented by the reforms.
When 27 states that were defaulting in paying salaries and pension no longer default, today that number is 0. Number of states defaulting. They're paying Nigerians. They're not paying Americans or Europeans or foreigners. They're not paying the rich people. They're paying the average Nigerian who can now.
All right, so that's the Honorable Minister for Finance coordinating the economy. That's how it's done. That's his portfolio. But let's bring in my guest, who is going to help us break down some of the things we'll be dealing with. My producer is going to be bringing up some slides we'll speak to. He talked about 15 trillion accruing in terms of subsidy. So 2 major reforms: removal of PMS subsidy, such that government doesn't take the responsibility via the NMPCL to underwrite any form of subsidy, and also the harmonization of currency. So there was no point defending the currency. So that's why that big jump and that shock happened. So some is just money illusion. There are other questions to be asked. But the good thing is that it was a fairly balanced presentation, the good, the bad, what would have been in the future. So he calls it benefit, cost, and maybe is it harms averted. We're going to probe those numbers as well. Let me bring in my guest. Is Dr. Paul Alaje is the Chief Economist at SPM Professionals. He joins us virtually. Dr. Alaje, thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you so very much for having me.
Dr. Alaje, I'm sure you've seen the presentation. Maybe you've heard some of the things Dr. Taiwo Idele has also presented. I have loads of questions. First concern I have, and I would like you to unpack it for me if you will. I know you're not him, but just in case you have the idea. First has to do with my worry about the number 15 trillion. Because we're doing what is called the DSDP, direct sale, direct purchase, in terms of the swap deal, where we're giving 300,000 barrels of crude per day to the traders to give us petroleum products in return. So if subsidy is gone, and what happens to that deal? And if the monies have been accrued, why are we not seeing it perhaps in the NNPCL balance sheet? Correct me if I'm wrong. So if that is correct, that alone should have given us almost 30 trillion if you annualize it, multiply it by 3 years. That's besides the money illusion that comes from new earnings from the customs, because now you were collecting $1 is 400 naira, now $1 is 1.4. So you can see how the money is multiplied in terms of illusion plus that. So first, do you agree that indeed it's 15 trillion or is something more than that? That's the first question. Let's begin from there, and then you can give us an overview of what you think about the presentation.
Yeah, thank you so very much. First of all, I would say that I'm quite impressed that Minister of Finance now decided to come to the fore to have what you want to call the Ministry of Economic Communication, or have a conversation that the media will participate in, instead of just picking numbers here and there. And I think it's important to encourage all of the ministry beyond Ministry of Finance or Ministry of Information. It's always good that people know what government is doing part time. I will really give it to the minister and his team and the other ministers that were there, by the way, because they were trying to communicate what is happening around the economy. So to me, that is something really very impressive. Now to look at the content of what is discussed. I listened very carefully. The minister mentioned two of the so many reforms that has happened, because there are quite a number of other places that government is trying to reform, which includes energy. Because when you look at cost of energy, a number of things have happened there. But this is what we can see. Due to reforms have major implication on all other reforms. I want to now, therefore, give it to, again, him for considering two major reforms. But this is the real issue. First issue here is that 15 trillion naira. Should it have been more? Now, it depends on who is speaking. If you are speaking as a finance or as an accounting person, yes, you might be looking at 15 trillion naira. But economists will be a bit more thorough. We'll look at what is the real cost. All you have seen are nominal costs. And how did we come about the number? If there were no subsidy, government would have not gotten in dollar terms what we have gotten. If there was no exchange rate unification or devaluation of the naira, properly speaking, we would have sold it at XYZ amount of money, at 400, 500, 600. But now that we have devalued the currency, we're able to do 1,350 naira on the average on one side. On the second side, we're able to get more in dollar terms because we are no longer doing forward payment. That is, central bank is no longer doing, NNPCL is no longer doing under recovery. So what is recovered is what we are seeing. So, but when you look at it that way, then you would quickly assume that, oh, this is how much we have made. The truth is, and I agree that we are making more in naira terms, but this is what I want to take our mind back. In dollar terms, are we really making more? That is on one hand. On the second hand, for most of the states that we have seen, based on the presentation, that have gotten a lot in terms of percentage, because the Honorable Minister made us understand that about 15.8 trillion naira is the estimated savings from subsidy, out of which federal government got about 5, the state government got about 6, many went to local government, who took the largest chunk of the monies. But the point is, have we looked at how those policies has also influenced or affected expenses of those states? Subsidy have done a few things, and exchange. One of the benefits it did is that, remember, I made a presentation in 2023 that some governors, based on the trend and what central bank said in MPC, that after FAC is released, we noticed that some of the money might have found their way into the parallel market, because just about the next day, you see that instability had progressed. So here is the point. What we observe here is that beyond the number that is quoted, the impact has been minimal. And I think the minister alluded to that. The impact in terms of household impact has been minimal. Why? Because we need to account for both sides. We have accounted for revenue that has increased sporadically, and we have all said this will be the impact. But how has this impacted the household, the real people? Has impacted them? What should we have done differently to help to support them? Because at the end of the day, people want to measure the impact on their personal economy and so on and so forth. We have seen that government has also increased minimum wage to about 70,000 naira. But what was household cost of living per day in an household before 2023, and what is cost of living per household today? So it's important to look at revenue increment in terms of cost. If the cost relatively is more than the revenue, then we say that people might say that, oh, it might be better off we were at a time than coming to a point where even what we realize as revenue is not able to take care of expenditure. So it's important to balance the argument that yes, subsidy has helped significantly and unification to help revenue increase. Government is putting forward 15.8 trillion. That's the number government is putting forward. Now that's okay. I don't have issues with it. Even though I feel if you look at it, you will pick a number of points from the 15.8 trillion naira that has been mentioned. If that be the case, how come debt servicing and debt itself increased sporadically? So that's new debt collection. How did it increase sporadically? So it's important to balance this. So I've seen that point, and I think I welcome quite a number of things that were raised by the Honorable Minister in his presentation.
Well, I try to follow the oil and gas industry, especially as it concerns us. So that's why I'm raising question about the swap deal and the lack of clarity as far as that swap deal is concerned. I hope that they can give us an answer that will be satisfactory. But let's move on. I did show, if my producer can put that up, some of what they call the social impact, which you alluded to, minimum wage increase by over 100%. But of course, it has been scraped off with inflation as well as incremental price of goods and services. No, not this one, the social impact one. But since my producer has jumped ahead of it, let's stay with this. This is one that has a bit of a concern for those of us who look at those numbers, how the money was spent. Now, I just want to take basically two. Okay, let's take it one after the other. Wage adjustments, say minimum wage, awards, allowances, gulped 9 trillion. So between the period under review. And I know that the size of the civil service about 2.9 or 2.5 million. Doesn't this speak about the size of government and the need for us to recalibrate and review the size of government itself? 9 trillion, gulping. Federal government got less than 5 trillion, or about 5 trillion in this whole subsidy windfall. And their wage bill on wage alone, on wage awards and adjustment to salaries, it's already taking all that money.
So if you look at what government quoted in terms of wage, we took significant, quite a large amount with spending. If you look again, the next thing after that is debt service. Then when you combine the two, you will be worried. You will really be worried, because when we say we have saved money from subsidy and exchange rate unification, should it be going to wages? Should it be going to debt service? The question you may ask is, why the money go to? I tell you,
oh dear.
you, rail, this is where the money should go to. This is where the money should go to. And because the money is going to salaries, and if I tell you, very few numbers of Nigerians are working with the government. The total number of labor government are is not up to 5 million Nigerians. Be charitable. Let us say 10 million Nigerians. It's less than 5% of the population. Less than 5% of the population. So if you do that on one hand, and you now added debt service payment with, then you will have a lot to worry about. So the point is, why did we then implement the policy? Why? If there are quite a number of other things that we could have done, the impacts truly should be when subsidies remove, the money has gone into one, say education, into infrastructure. You see, when we say we remove money from subsidy, we knew that this will definitely impact cost of living, especially cost of transportation. What is the alternative? We put the money in what are we investing the money? We need to pick about 7 of the states in Nigeria where you have a lot of movements, which includes Rivers, Abuja, Lagos, Ibadan, Kano, Kaduna. You pick those 7 states where you have a lot of population, a lot of movement. What can we do with those states? How can we reorganize the transport system in those states? Then you look at another 21 states where you have more like a great big state. Can we create movement such that can help the people reduce the impact on labor, on workers? Because giving workers more money has never solved the problem. We keep giving them more money. If we make policy and think, don't worry, when labor comes, we give them more money. That has been the approach for years. I've discussed this with government. I've discussed it with labor. Very soon labor will come out and say, we need more salaries. The first time I told them what they should benchmark on, no, they went 30,000 less, 70% or 100% of what they should get. Today, labor is coming up again to say the money is not enough. Let me tell you, no amount of money will be enough because labor is not chasing real income. Government is not paying labor real income. The question may be, what should be real income? Where you spend your money on, what can you buy? You want to spend it on education? In primary school, which is the responsibility of local government, perhaps some states, secondary school, if they are not functional, that is where labor now wants to take their children to private school. And the salary afford it. Look at rent. You are in Lagos. How much is 2-bedroom flats? Not necessarily the Lekki of this world or the Ikeja of this world. How much is rent? For those listening to us in Abuja, how much is rent? In Dube, in Nemitz, in Peru, how much is rent? The price has since increased. Compare that to what labor is earning. So we dictate as rent multiplied from 2023 to 2026 by 2. No, it has jumped by nearly 300 to 400%. And these are really very basic things. If you must talk about basic, you have to talk about housing, you have to talk about clothing, you have to talk about food, and you have to talk about transport. These are really 4 basic things. Yeah. But the cost of these 4 basic things have increased overall by an average of 300%. But salary has increased by 100%. This is the gap. This is why we say that the policies are correctly intended, but foundation should have been built, and the direction of the spend should go to what can help us mitigate the impact. One of the mitigants here will be rail, will be road, will be quality education in primary. And please, this is not just about federal government. A meeting must be held where local government, the direct payment going to local government, must be invested in education, primary health, secondary health. This is
all right, Dr. Alaje. Yes,
about the poor.
My apologies.
Are the things we must do for them.
Because of time, yes, well said. Because this has even shown us that there's a lot of responsibility down the line to the state and the local government. So we've talked about my argument and challenge about whether those numbers are correct in terms of 15 trillion, whether via devaluation or expressly our swap deal that money should have been accruing to the federal government. I've also talked about the issue of the size of the federal civil service as against 9 trillion in 3 years, which looks like a lot of money for just a few people. But let's talk about something that borders on constitution. In fact, someone said it's an impeachable offense. If you look at how the money was spent, item number 3, they call it strategic infrastructure development. My producer will put it up in the first slide. Strategic, and that gulped about some 6 trillion. in excess of 6 trillion. And then if you go down to find out what is this strategic infrastructure development, I'm trying to get, I hope my producer can join me on this because it's so that the audience will follow. You see the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Highway, Sokoto-Badagry Highway, I see it's 2.2 trillion naira. The reason I query this 2.2 trillion is simple, Dr. Alaji, and I want you to help me break it down. The Lagos-Calabar Coastal Highway is the EPC plus F funding and financing model where federal government is supposed to contribute maybe 30% at most. Now that 30%, depending on how the entire valuation goes, if it's 15 trillion, if it's 12 trillion, you can do the math as to what will come from federal government. But between 2024, 2025, and even 2026 budget, you hardly see Lagos-Calabar Coastal Highway in the appropriation bill passed by the National Assembly. In fact, this year's budget is just 70 million. I think 2025 was about 500 million. So, and this is government that has released 2.2 trillion. Who approved this money to be given? Because we are talking about CapEx not being implemented for what is budgeted for. Yet, what is not budgeted for, although it's an important project, is getting funded.
So I will speak to this by saying, first of all, on any highway, any infrastructure, a number of know me for advocate of infrastructure because we have very low volume of infrastructure in our nation. So I appreciate any initiative which includes Lagos, Calabar, Sokoto, Badagry, then Trans-Sahara highways. But please, it's important we put all of these in our laws. It's important, when I say laws, I mean we put them in the budget. If we don't put them in the budget, then we have a lot to worry about. I've looked at the budget myself. I've not really seen the kind of volume I've seen in this presentation on the budget. It could be that maybe at FAC, federal and state government agree this is how they want to spend the money. But clearly speaking, this is not enough. We need to put this in the budget. This money is more like the money for the federal government or federation, as the case may be. We need to put it in the budget. We need to see it, that this is how these monies were disbursed. Recall that when President Buhari was in office, we talked about ways and means, and we had extensive conversation on it. That's one of the things that put us in problem at the end of the day. And when I say problem, I mean inflationary problem as a nation. So those that are not in the budget, we need to have a rethink. We need to properly budget for them so that we will not be spending outside the federal budget, because some of these will now become to a large extent illegal until we make them really very official.
Dr. Alaji, we're going to have more time to expand. Look, I love development. Yes. I've been to Cape Town and I've seen what Coastal Road looks like. So I can envision what the president is envisioning, but he has to do it by law. Yes. If what we have as lawful expenditure is not captured, and yet what is not in the law is being spent on, is illegal, is impeachable, and that has to be corrected. But we must thank you.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Thank you. Dr. Paul Alaje is the chief economist at SPM Professionals. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
And that's it on the program. Thank you for your time and company. I'm Jeffrey Uzongo. You've been served on Lunchtime Politics. Bye-bye.